Welcome everybody. It is fantastic to see a room full of smiling and thoughtful faces today for the launch of this wonderful book, An Unexpected Life by Vesna Svetichinen. Before we start, I want to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people here in Canberra, and pay my respect to the elders past and present. I'm very grateful to live on this land these days, and I grew up on the coast on Dharawal land, and now Ngunnawal country feels like home. Here we're in a very European and English style of building an environment with all these beautiful introduced plants that give us such a lovely show in spring and autumn. But I just want to kind of acknowledge what an amazing environment we're in, surrounded by the gum trees and the hills around Canberra, and have a moment of gratitude for that. People have been telling stories and sharing their experiences on this country for millennia before we settlers arrived here. And yeah, I'm very, very grateful to share this country. So, welcome to all of you. A special welcome to the Ambassador of the Republic of Serbia, His Excellency, Mr. Rade Stefanovic. Did I get that right? Yeah. Excellent. And his wife, Mrs. Stefanovic. Welcome. It's so good that you were able to join us for this beautiful event today. And I'm really thrilled to be part of this launch. This project's been a long time in the making, not only with Vesna's working on the project and undertaking the interviews that have created it, but all of the relationships and lives that have been brought together in this book and in this room today. I'm going to first of all introduce our first speaker, who is Jen Webb. Jen Webb is a distinguished professor of creative writing at the University of Canberra, a writer and cultural theorist. Along that kind of big and complex role, Jen writes poetry, researches creative practice, and makes and exhibits artists' books. So she's quite the creative herself, and she will now speak about An Unexpected Life.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for inviting me to launch it. Lovely to see so many people coming out on a very, very glorious day when we should all be in our gardens weeding, I think. But I'm delighted to see people here, and so impressed to see most of you. Most of the stories have come along. An Unexpected Life. I love the way that Vesna says it is recorded by her rather than crafted. It's a very humble way to approach it. Vesna sent me a copy a little while ago, and I read it from cover to cover with real delight. It's 12 stories that in many ways are standing for all of us who are migrants, so many of us who are migrants, who have similar tales, and I can see so many resonances as I read through the 12 stories. All the women came here as adults, or at least not as small children. They came for the reasons people do change countries and continents, and, used to and still do, because of war, because of repressive regimes, because of broken hopes and broken hearts, in search of different life for work, or because they carelessly married somebody who liked to travel. I left my own home country many years ago for difficult reasons, and I feel that I'm hearing some of my own story in this. So, these wonderful women come from Afghanistan, from Ceylon/Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Chile, Ghana, the Republic of North Macedonia, Romania, Peru, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and my own original home, South Africa. And of course, for Vesna, what she describes as Yugoslavia, but actually Serbia. Right? So that's most of the continents in the world. Among these 12 women, we're covering a great deal of the globe. And Vesna is at the heart of the book, although she modestly identifies herself, as I said, as having just recorded it. Reading through the stories, you can see that she is the connective tissue. She offers a small vignette of her own arrival here in her own life, and then she starts each of the other 11 stories with introduction to who this person is and how she met them and how she found them, and then they go on with their own stories. It's a characteristically warm and interested and empathic voice And the 12 vignettes that appear in this book, they're longer than vignettes, but 12 stories that appear in this book, make a lovely spider web of contacts and point, I think, to the skill that so many women possess in building community, in establishing networks, and in spreading love and affection and compassion. Sorry I have to read off my computer, but I've been running around. It's fine, thanks. So, a rich, heartening series of stories, compelling tales of loneliness, of isolation, of culture shock, recounting the loss of family, the loss of a sense of belonging, and then the rebuilding of self and society. I think the stories downplay some of the stresses and the tragedies that are involved so often in the dislocation of migrant life, and more so the dislocation of refugee life. But what we see in their tales is courage and grace, determination and resilience, grief, and learning how to accommodate grief. And also, which is kind of nice for those of us who live in Canberra, shows how Canberra, with all its weirdnesses, complexities, odd characteristics and delights, can provide space for migrants, we migrant women, to build unexpected lives. The other thing I think probably appears is something I too have experienced. Once you've left your home, you are effectively homeless in the sense of not belonging anywhere in particular. We're foreigners always in our new homeland. If we go back to our original homeland, we are visitors who no longer are there. And this could seem a bit dismal, but what I think I see in these stories, and what I myself has found, is if you don't have that one sense of belonging, you kind of belong everywhere. And you can find yourself at home and make home everywhere. And we do see that in these stories. And the last thing I want to say about this book is that it shows the power of parents in helping girls, and I will say girls, this is all women, girls shape their characters, their aspirations, and their attitudes to life. So many of the stories honor the narrators' mothers and fathers, but particularly mothers, with love and respect and gratitude for the role models they provided, for the care they provided, for the training in life that gave each of these women the resilience to manage the shock of leaving home permanently, to absorb and not be crushed by the losses, and to build an unexpected and often joyous and deeply satisfying life. My uncle had to flee into exile when I was a very little kid. He ended up in New Zealand. He's always been a very strong advocate for migrants and refugees. He always says they bring the skills and energy and determination and creativity every country needs. And I thought, yeah, that's my uncle, he did it, so he thinks everyone. But actually, I'm reading these stories, I think he's spot on. And I'm going to do 3 little quotes from 3 of the stories, although every story deserves lots of quotes. Sarah says in her section, I think every refugee comes with loads of skills and experience. And my uncle would agree there. Union Chin says, you can think, that's not possible, and not do something, or you just keep at it and keep pushing. And Darcy says this very beautiful line. I once heard a story about how it's impossible for the stream to flow upwards, but I think nothing is impossible for a woman. We are clever and courageous. We can send the stream upwards. This is a book full of people who are sending the stream upwards, people who are finding something impossible and yet making it possible, people who are drawing on their skills and experiences, and it's such a gift to us as Australians to see these stories and hear them. Thank you, Vesna. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Jen. Our next speaker is Vesna herself, and I am going to, I know many of you know her probably better than I do, but I'm going to give her an introduction anyway. So Vesna is the woman who's brought us all together as the creator and facilitator of this wonderful project. You learn a lot about Vesna reading this book, but in a nutshell, I would say she is a powerhouse, a lawyer, a manager, a mediator, writer, poet, and could I say matriarch? Yay! Vesna was born in Sombor in Serbia and moved to Australia in 1990 with her husband Miloš and young family, where she forged a career and has built a richly and deeply connected life. And this book is a testament to the wide range of authentic and diverse relationships that she has created along the way. Please congratulate Vesna on this book with a round of applause and welcome her to tell us more.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how full my heart is to see everyone, every single one of you here. I'm so humbled by your words, Jen. It is amazing. And I can just hope that all of you, once you have an opportunity to read the book, have similar feelings and have the same perception of what this book is all about and what we are all about. I would like to acknowledge the country that we are on as well, on my own behalf, because we all are grateful to be here. Thank you, Jackie, for accepting to be the host today. And thank you, Jen, again, for your kind words. I would like to thank all my friends here, and most of them have met each other for the first time today, because we have been in Canberra for some time, but some of us have, or some of you have moved away. In this book you'll find aspects of politics, who is interested in politics, aspects of public service and nuances, and some harsh realities related to public service as well, and how we've actually fought and lived through them. Personal challenges, all underpinned by enthusiasm. I would just like to also say that there are common personality traits. We are all different, but we have some things that I've identified with all these friends of mine. We are positive, we are determined, we have time for each other, and we are grateful. And I think these things are really important traits for everyone. And when it is all put together in one person, or the 12 people here, that's something to read about. And last thing is that we do get hurt, but we don't have grudges. Last part of this is to tell you about the project itself, and thank you for recognizing that I put recorded, and I had different ideas coming from the publisher, and I decided to go as recorded by me, because you will read, especially at the back of the book, you read how it all started. Sorry, this microphone is going in and out. And it was an idea that pretty much came to me a number of years ago, but I started working on it about 3 years ago. And the process was, I approached people. A couple of women had personal situations, so they could not join us. But we that are here, join us in the book, but we that are here, we all said, yes, let's do it. And there were interviews, there were personal meetings as well, face-to-face, over Zoom, thank God for technology. And then I transcribed it, sort of made a 50-page long story that went to the editor, and editor got it back to the current version. And then everyone has seen it, approved it, and it got to the printers. That's the story of a book. Every book has a story, and this is our story. Thank you again for coming, and thank you for buying the book.
Because I'm now just going to host a conversation with these wonderful women here, and hopefully we'll get a little bit more of an insight. I'd originally thought to ask some of them to do some reading, but I think I'm better off to leave that for you to read in the book yourself, and to actually draw out some of the threads that interconnect the book, and also a little bit about the experience of being involved in the book today. Could I ask, first of all, if you could just go down along the line and actually introduce yourself, let everybody know what your name is, perhaps when you arrived in Australia or Canberra, given that migration is the kind of particular common thread here, and whether you're still living in Canberra or where you're somewhere else now, and then I'll ask some more particular questions. Would you be able to start? Yeah. And if you can use the microphones, that'd be great, unless you're confident.
Do I need that? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm Edith Fuensalida Palacios. I came to Australia in 1977. Originally, I went to Melbourne. I was there for a year. And then I moved to Canberra, and since then I haven't moved anywhere else, apart from holidays, of course. And this is the place where I want to stay until I die.
Thank you.
I'm Bobby Graham, and I've been living in Australia since 1998. This is kind of my second migration because my family's from Serbia, so my full name is Slobodanka and was Vasilkovic, and I touched upon something that Jen said, that where do we feel at home? Well, I feel almost equally at home in Belgrade, Cape Town and Canberra, so it's an interesting experience. And I, like you, not looking forward to dying, but,
but one day we will.
One day we will. And my hope is that I will be buried at the Serbian monastery at Hall. Thank you.
Gosh, I don't think I've ever thought that far. My name is On Ying Chin. On Ying stands for On stands for peace. Although my husband will tell you I'm not terribly peaceful. Ying stands for courage. So it's a nice name, I think, for me. One to aspire to, and the second one to aspire to. And of course, Chin is my family name. I come from Malaysia, and I've been here since 1980. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think, with the exception of 3 years when the whole family sort of up sticks and moved to Paris for 3 years to work, where I worked. I've always been in Canberra ever since. I arrived in Canberra, and I'm in Canberra now. But I don't know where I shall be before I pass away. I haven't thought that far.
Yeah, if you can just move it because we don't have the sound. Yeah. Yeah.
My name is Aka Ballinger. I come from Romania. The first time I decided to remain to Australia was in 2007, but I've been previously before since 2001. I've always thought it was a beautiful country, and then I finally decided I'll stay. And that's pretty much me in a nutshell. Nowadays I'm spending my time. Initially we lived in Brisbane, and then we moved to Canberra in 2008. And nowadays I'm spending my time between Canberra and Yass. Did you all see the Macca's sign when it was there? Yes. Yeah. Sadly, it's not anymore, but it was a great joke. Great icebreaker every time, because I don't think they thought about the name of our town. It's Yass, right? And they have the big M next to Yass. Welcome to Yass. Oh. That's...
I'm Romaine Ratnam, and it's interesting that I'm sitting between the two who come from Romania. And I think I must be the oldest of Vesna's friends here, and I arrived earliest perhaps. I came to Australia from Sri Lanka in 1969, and I consider this my home. I have only 2 cousins left in Sri Lanka whom I'm in touch with, so I feel very Australian, and I'd love to end my life here.
Good morning all, my name is Anka Kostin. I'm Romanian, as you've heard. I came to Australia in March 2009. My husband is Australian from Canberra. We used to meet overseas, and we were about to get married in June 2009. And I've been here the entire time. My parents-in-law are in Canberra, and strategically always wanted to live next to them, because I always planned in advance and knew that one day they will be great to have them around for my children. I haven't thought that far away about that, despite the fact I'm a lawyer. I do hope that later on in life, at retirement, I'll get to spend probably half of my time in Romania during summertime to avoid the winter time in Canberra, because it's perfectly aligned to be summer here when it's winter there and the other way around. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Does it work?
Yes, it's on.
Hey?
Yeah. Should be okay.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, it does work. I'm going to use this piece of technology because I might use my voice, because I'm very excited, and this is another unexpected experience in my life, to talk in front of such a big audience in English. So my name is Violeta Andrić. I'm from Sarajevo, from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I came to Australia in March 1996 with my husband and our oldest son Alyosha, who was only 2 months shy of 6 at the time. And I also was pregnant 7 months with our younger son Alex. We came straight to Canberra, and we've been in Canberra since. At first it was very hard for me because Canberra is so different from any other city we used to live in. So for the first few years it was really hard. I felt very lonely. There was no people on the streets, and you know, the second day after our arrival, we went out for a walk we went to Belconnen. It was Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock. We dressed up, put our nice clothes on, and then we were walking around, and there was literally no one around. So my husband was like, maybe some important person died, you know, they're mourning. So yeah, it was really interesting at the beginning, but now I grew up loving this city. It's a beautiful city, and I would never move from here. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Thank you. But it's like the passeggiata in Italian, the kind of like strolling after lunch. It's a kind of a tradition that never really seems to have taken off here, as civilised as it is. Too hot, yes, maybe it's more siesta culture that we needed to adopt here, but we haven't done that very well yet either. So I actually wanted to use a little quote from Violetta's story to kind of continue with that conversation. It was something that really struck me. She was talking about arriving in Split after fleeing Sarajevo, and a saying suddenly came to me that I had heard many years ago. We all sail in the same sea, but some navigate in a boat and some in a yacht. And in that very moment, I understood the true meaning of it. And reading this book, it's true for anybody. We never know what somebody's experiences are when we first meet them, but particularly people who've been who've come as migrants from places very different from Australia, which has really reinforced to me how much we don't on first meeting know what kinds of experiences and how people actually came to get here. And you know, those stories include triumphs and also tremendous trials and difficulties. And as someone said earlier, possibly I think there's probably even more to that than we see in some of the stories here, the challenging and difficult aspects of it, because I think making the best of things is clearly a skill that all of you share that comes through in this book as well. So when you were just talking about your name, Wan Ying, and saying Ying is courage, is that correct?
Yes.
And yeah, that really is an excellent lead into my first question, whether you chose to come to Australia pursuing opportunities or a relationship, or whether you came because you were fleeing, were actually leaving because you were pushed because of unsafe and intolerable situations. I think courage is definitely a factor in taking the step of leaving and going to another country to live. Would any of you be happy to, I don't want to kind of pick people out, but would any of you like to reflect on what you think might have been the real kind of like moment of courage, or the thing that kind of gave you the courage to make the decision? And I guess the other thing I'm interested in is taking that courageous step to live in a different place. Has that affected how you make big decisions and how you consider risk otherwise as your life has gone forward? Would anyone like to talk about courage and risk?
So many things to unpack there in
Yes.
those questions. I'll just comment quickly on why we left South Africa, where I was living, where I was born. I met my husband, and he said at the time, South Africa is not a place to grow old in. And that kind of set me on this decision to move, because my sister was living in Australia at the time, and she had for most probably 15 years prior to that encouraged me to come here. And I think that decision to move was made easier by the fact for me that in South Africa we were just a small family, my mother, my father, my sister and myself. So I had this weight of Serbian family up there, growing up in Australia here, and then moving to growing up in South Africa, and then moving to Australia was almost like a relief because it was the start of something completely new. And for me at the time, that's what made sense. So while we weren't leaving because we were persecuted, we did understand that South Africa was not a country to grow old in for us, and that was that reason.
Thanks, Bobby. Did
Sure.
anyone else want to respond or reflect on that kind of issue?
In my case, it's probably there's nothing to do with risk. Probably just risk of getting divorced, but other than that, there was no other real risk. I came here for my husband, as I said earlier, and who's Australian, very Australian, in the sense that saying to me, when we used to live overseas, Australia is the best country in the world. I had come at that time once to visit it, and I did like it, but I don't know if I was necessarily sold on being the best country in the world. It was very far from Europe. But when time came for both of us to decide what we're going to do with our lives and deciding having a life together, my father made it very clear I can't move to Australia unless he proposes. I'm very East European minded. I did not say that to my husband because I'm like, we don't need this kind of pressure. But when I came to Australia, for us was more of a decision, probably thinking, well, I speak English, you don't speak Romanian, and that was probably the easiest way of thinking, well, where should we be? Beside the fact that my husband Richard thought that Australia is the best place to be. And I grew to agree with him. That grew with me in time. I think Australia, despite that, when we all come here, we feel that we are different, because at that time I knew only my husband and his parents, and that's all. And you do have a sense of where do I go from here. But once you start to integrate and start working or studying, or I think in general people are very welcoming. So I think the risk that potentially you might have felt initially disappears as you become part of the community. And I've always felt included in Canberra, at least, and I'm always grateful for Canberrans being so welcoming to people from all sorts of walks of life. And as I said earlier, I'm a lawyer, and when I started appearing in courts around 10 years ago, there was hardly anyone with an accent. Now there's more solicitors doing that. I'm a barrister nowadays. There's still hardly any barristers with an accent. I'm probably one of the very few. In Canberra, for sure, I'm the only one. I don't know about Australia, but Canberrans and I think Australians are giving us the chance if we can prove ourselves. So I'm always grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I move on to another question, did anybody else want to talk about courage before we keep going? No? Sorry? Yes. Fantastic.
Well, in my case, it's completely different to the rest of the ladies. I came to Australia because I've got married, and the person I married to at the time, he was living here, so I didn't have any other choice. It was this one or nothing, or no marriage. So that was the reason why I came. I never thought I was going to come to a country where it was so different to mine. That was my shock when I
And
arrived.
you're coming from Chile.
Yes, I was coming from Chile. So where is very much a community thing, very family orientated, and everyone is with the neighbors doing things together. And I came here, and especially Canberra, I can relate to you, Violetta, that after 5:30 during weekdays, nothing in the street, empty, and also Saturdays and Sundays. So I didn't have any kind of community life at all. Also, the language was another aspect of the issue. I didn't speak the language properly. I couldn't understand it, couldn't express myself. And it was difficult. I didn't have anyone. I didn't know anyone. So no friends, nothing. So it was more like trying to push and push and push to do whatever society was doing, get to know the people in Australia, the culture, integrate to the whatever they were doing was difficult. And 77 we didn't have as much as help as today with migrants. It wasn't an interpreter. It wasn't nothing. So you have to do it on your own.
Yeah. I think that speaks very directly to courage, to being able to kind of take those kind of challenges on and persevere and persist. And I think, Anka, you kind of were talking about needing to prove yourself.
Yes.
Is that sense of feeling like you needed to prove yourself something that you would all share?
Yes.
I can't say. I mean, I'm pondering over your question, Jackie, about courage and that first move and the first decision to stay. I can't say there's a lot of courage involved in my part. I think it was very incremental. I came over to Australia as a student. Back then, as is now, lots of international students come across to study, for whatever reasons. And in my case, it was to get a better education here that would not have been available in Australia and in Malaysia at the time because of the institutionalized racial sort of a divide. And then it was, after that it was, I need to stay for my graduation. These days it's a very civilized. Graduation is immediately after you finish your university, so it's not a big deal. Back when I went to university, which seems an age ago, it was 6 months after you graduated. So I really needed something to tie me over so that I had a reason to stay on. And I was looking for summer vacation work kind of idea. And I landed a job, a proper job, which I didn't expect, as an economist, which is what I was trained as at the time. And of course, then I met my husband. So one thing led to another, and I ended up staying. It seemed a logical next step. So where is home? Home is where my family is. Home is where my husband is, really. So wherever he is, and wherever my family is, I'm home. And so I don't think it took a lot of courage on my part. It was just a natural progression. And I think it was easier too, because when I came across, unlike many of my friends here, my new friends here, I was quite young. I was 18. And when you're 18, you're invincible. Anything is possible. And when you're me, anything is possible. So I think that combination does mean that, in fact, I don't think of it in terms of being a courageous or risky venture. It was just part of one quite, smooth, if you like, adventure. And I know back when I came too, there weren't that many migrants living in Canberra. We were still very white, if you don't, pardon my saying. It's, but I think I was more of a shock to Canberrans than they were to me. Again, I put it down to the fact that this is just who I am. And growing up in Malaysia, everybody is different. It's very multicultural, and being different is the norm. That's what you expect. So in a way, coming across here and finding myself in the midst of something very, very different, was the norm. So I don't relate to the risk aspect of this. The risk was probably getting married, I think. At least as big a risk, at least a big risk for my husband as it was for me, if not bigger.
And I think that thing of kind of a progression of smaller steps leading you to somewhere, as opposed to kind of getting to a threshold where you really have to make a big jump, is kind of one of the differences in the different paths in this book. I think Jen, in her opening remarks, talked about how much the stories reflect back on all of your parents and your families and how their attitudes and support and so on and perspective shaped the people that you have become, the women you've become, and how you've progressed through your life. Something else that came out to me, and I think Anka's story was one that really drew my attention, was then the different experience that your children have had compared to your lives of making the move here and then raising children who either came here at a much younger age or were born here and have grown up without that same experience. But any of you like to reflect on what differences you see, and I suppose what the the positives and the benefits, and I guess maybe the things that you were hoping to do by moving to this place to raise your families, and perhaps things that you think they might have missed out on, or experiences that are harder for them to have here?
Climbing trees.
Sorry, what was that?
Climbing trees.
They can do that here or not here?
Well, it's frowned upon, let's put it that way. Every time I did let my kids climb trees at the parks or in the nature reserves, I got kind of looks from the other parents. I don't know whether it's seen as it's a risky thing to do, but that's how I grew up, climbing trees all the time.
Wow. Maybe it's a new thing, because I grew up climbing trees too,
Yes.
so maybe it's
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock.
intergenerational.
It was a bit of a shock. Maybe we are pampering or bubble wrapping our kids a bit too much.
So maybe that's where some of the risk question comes.
Yeah, but going back to the courage for a bit, for me it was never really a matter of the courage to, do anything other than the courage to leave a comfortable life behind and just jump into the unknown. And it's funny you said you were 18-year-old. If anyone would tell the 18-year-old me, this is how your life will unfold, my 18-year-old persona would be like, no way. And it's funny because I remember a time when all the ladies here, we were discussing the title of the book. And I thought an unexpected life is really what my life is, because I would have never thought it would turn out this way. The 18-year-old me was going to be an, what's the word? An archaeologist. I had that in my mind since I was probably in primary school. I wanted to be an archaeologist, but then it didn't happen. And the 19-year-old me was a journalist, and I even went and studied and became, a proper journalist. And then the 20-something-year-old me became an explorer, decided to leave it all, back and travel around the world. Really just because of a story that I was covering as a journalist. And I remember a moment in time in 2001 when I was sitting in Melbourne with one of my best friends, and I said, I think this was one of my first visits to Australia, and I thought, I think I could live here. But never would I have thought that actually I was going to live here. It was really just circumstances after circumstances after circumstances. And everybody's asking me, so how did you and Paul, my husband, meet? And we met in Hawaii, out of all places. And so we both worked on a cruise ship, and I was in charge of safety, and he was a casino guy. And we had a delay because one of the propellers broke. And instead of staying one night in Hawaii, we stayed 3 nights in Hawaii. And that's how I met my husband, because we were just getting out of the ship, and he said, I said, oh, this is really like the suspension bridges when you're stepping and it's kind of bouncing. And then he turned around and told me about his grandfather, who apparently was providing the steel for Sydney Bridge. And we started to talk, and then he said, he said, where are you off to? And I said, I don't know, I've been to Hawaii before. I just wanted to stretch my legs before I go back for my shift. And he said, do you want to come with us? We're going to Nashville. And I said, Nashville? That's a bit far from here. And he looked at me so pitiful and said, no, Nashville is a bar. And this is where the funny thing starts. Gambling is actually prohibited in Hawaii, but we were playing blackjack, because they were all the casino dealers out of, what do when they go off? They play blackjack. Instead of dealing, they just play it. But it's prohibited, so you could play it in that particular bar, but not for money. They would give you drink vouchers. This was my first time ever when I played blackjack, and I won everything. I could get everyone drunk. And that's the beginning of my story. That's how I ended up in Australia anyway.
So I think that, as well as teaching us not to play cards against Arthur, especially if there's money involved.
I played then in a casino in St. Petersburg, and I lost everything.
That's comforting to know in a funny kind of a way. But yeah, I suppose it's those chance meetings and accidents and bumping into things, as well as the small steps and then those big decisions to jump that all together kind of are what creates an unfolding life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes,
talk about kids?
Yes, please. That was my question.
So I came to Australia with 2 small kids. This one here, who was 8 months old, and my son, he's somewhere looking after his kids probably, who was 3 years old, 3.5. And I never thought we would stay here. It just happened, and I don't know, someone must have been looking after us, maybe my mother who had died already, and that's really what I believe. And I have to write a book about that. Second book, yes. Is that we came here to visit my maternal grandmother, and in 3 months, and people who come from that area, we came here in May 1990. We went back because we had return tickets, but we had permanent resident visas. We went back after 3 months. The war started in Yugoslavia. You just cannot believe what happened in 3 months. We couldn't believe it. My husband, who finished political sciences, he was just like gobsmacked. This is not possible. The television news, the radio programs, the music, everything changed. We went back to Sombor, and we could not see a single program from Croatia. And we are like 25 kilometers airwise. And we used to watch all sorts of programs from Croatia. All of a sudden you can't. In Croatia, one of my best friends, she says, we can't see anything from Belgrade. We can't see anything from Serbia. I mean, it was crazy. We stayed there for 2 months. And one day, my husband says, are we going to go into this dark winter with all these dark news, with all these dark, sad things surrounding us? Or let's just go back to Australia for a summer or 2, 34 years later. So someone asked me, a good friend of mine asked me once, do you call yourself a refugee? And I said, I don't know how you define refugee. What is a refugee? I came to visit, went back, decided that risk and courage and all of that, it's probably better for the little kids and us to just go here. And on the side, Miloš got offered a permanent job. I mean, really? And here in Australia. And then you just say, I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway.
It was to do with the children and children having different experiences.
And then children, grew up, and we thought it was better for the kids. When they started going into their teenage years and looking for relationships and that, and they said, why did we come here? I like Serbian boys. I like Serbian girls. I like those customs. We like those, traditions. Oh, Mom, will you cook that particular Serbian food that our grandmother made and all of that? Ella, don't take it wrong. He did not like many Serbian girls. So anyway, yes, so that's how it is. So it's challenging on many fronts, and challenging for us, but also challenging for the children. That's what I believe.
I have something to say about that. So when I met Vesna the first time, it was at probably one of the first Mother Tongue events that was organized by Jackie and Lauren. And when I saw Vesna with her daughter, I said, this is who I want to be in a few years. Because for me, I had very young children at that time. But what really blew me off was the support that Dunia gave her mother in coming and taking part in a workshop about poetry and sharing your own language. And I was like, this is what I want for my relationship with my daughter. So you've done well.
Anybody want to continue on that theme? Yes, okay, Violetta and then
I just would like to say that we came here because of our children. I have to say that, mostly because for the future of our children. And my husband and I and our oldest son, we are refugees in the purest meaning of that word. We lived through the war in Sarajevo. so from the beginning of the war up until October 94. My son was 18 months old when the war started, and he was 4.5 when we left. So all he could remember in that early stage of his life was war. He even invented fairy tales, about Snow White, who lived in the middle of the forest, and then the windows were shuttered, and that was what he was telling us when he was little. And back to the courage. I actually don't. What courage is? I was told many times by many people how courageous I was as a refugee coming, leaving city the way we left it and stuff like that. But then, when I think back now, maybe I was courageous, but I didn't think that way back then. I just was fighting the battle. I was fighting to survive. And whatever we did only to survive. You don't think at those moments you do whatever you can to survive. You don't think if you're courageous, if you should do this or that. You just do what you have to do. And I also heard many times people would say, oh, I don't know how you did it. I couldn't do it. Never say I can't do it something or I couldn't do it, because you have no idea what you could do if you had to. And now back to our children. We came here for them because we are from Balkans, and Balkans have always been a very, very tumultuous part of the world. Every 30, 40, 50 years, there is a war over there. My grandfather was very young when the First World War started. My father was a year or two old when the Second World War started. And then my son was like 2 years old when the Third War started.
Every generation.
So yeah, every generation had to go through it. And as for my husband and I, had we have stayed over there, I'm sure we would have good life. We would do our jobs, we would have our friends. Because back now over there, life is pretty much okay. There are still big tensions and stuff, but I mean, they live normal life. But we didn't want our children to go through the same experience that we did, and that's why we came over here. And they are very happy here. They are very happy here. They consider themselves Australians, and that's what we wanted them to do. Of course, they know their background. They know where their parents came from. But I'm so proud that they call themselves Australians, and so do we. I mean, I'm Bosnian. I'm Australian or Bosnian. Or Bosnian Australian. I don't know even what I am anymore, but doesn't matter. The first generation always opposite. So